The Dallas Wings just made it crystal clear. They had zero interest in keeping Dejani Carrington around, and the writing was on the wall long before the trade went down. Carrington was sitting on that bench looking like a player who knew her time was up, looking like someone who didn't want to be there. And trust me, the organization didn't want her either. Her energy was off, her performance was slipping, and when the front office decided to ship her out, it wasn't a surprise. It was inevitable. The problem wasn't just her numbers or her attitude. It was the fact that Carrington had turned into one of the most polarizing names in the entire WNBA. And then comes Cheryl Reeve, the Minnesota Lynx coach, who just couldn't resist sticking her hand in the hornet's nest. This is the same Cheryl Reeve who got embarrassed by Caitlin Clark during the All-Star draft, the same Cheryl Reeve who decided to snub Clark from the Olympic roster, and the same Cheryl Reeve who has been throwing shade at Clark since the very beginning of her pro career. Her pride was wounded, her ego bruised, and instead of taking the high road, she made the pettiest move possible. She signed the player most known for her beef with Caitlin Clark. The Lynx, a team that had everything going for them this season, just opened the door to chaos by bringing in Carrington. If you think this was about basketball, you're dead wrong. This was about revenge, bitterness, and making a statement to Clark and the Indiana Fever. And the statement is loud. Reeve isn't done playing games. Now let's rewind for a second. Carrington's history is messy, and I don't mean messy in a fun, entertaining way. I'm talking about leading the league in flagrant fouls, racking up a highlight reel of dirty plays that look more like WWE clips than basketball tape. She's pulled hair, she's thrown elbows, and she even left Caitlin Clark with a black eye during the playoffs. Jason Whitlock didn't sugarcoat it. He called it what it was, an assault, not a basketball play. Fans were outraged, but the league did nothing. No suspension, no real punishment, just a shrug from officials while Clark played through visible injuries. And instead of accountability, Carrington jumped on social media crying victim, insisting people were just picking on her for playing hard. That's the narrative she sells, but fans and players know the truth. This isn't toughness, this is recklessness. This is someone whose reputation is so toxic that her name comes up in arguments about whether the league is protecting its brightest stars. And yet, Cheryl Reeve thought it was a good idea to bring her to a championship-caliber squad? Think about that. The Lynx are sitting at the top of the league 24/5, looking like they're destined for another title run. They've got Nafisa Collier playing MVP-level basketball, shooters all around, and a defense that suffocates opponents. They're already a machine, a dynasty in the making. What could possibly convince Reeve to add Carrington? It sure isn't her stats. It isn't her shooting, her efficiency, or her ability to elevate teammates. It's spite, plain and simple. Reeve saw Clark swap her out at the All-Star draft, watched the entire internet laugh about it, and instead of brushing it off, she turned around and signed Clark's loudest critic. That's not strategy, that's pettiness at its finest. Imagine putting sugar in a Ferrari's gas tank just because the dealer hurt your feelings. That's what this move feels like. Now the drama gets thicker. Indiana Fever fans are salivating at the idea of a final showdown between Clark and Carrington. Imagine it. Fever versus Lynx, Clark versus Collier, with Carrington thrown in as the enforcer. You can practically script the chaos. Clark torching defenders, Carrington trying her usual dirty tricks, referees swallowing their whistles, and the entire basketball world watching to see if karma finally comes knocking. Because here's the truth. Carrington's reckless play has a way of backfiring. It's one thing to pull hair in the regular season, but in the finals, one ejection, one unnecessary foul at the wrong moment, and suddenly the Lynx could see their season slip through their fingers. Reeve is gambling her entire legacy on a player whose biggest contribution to the game is chaos. And let's not forget the psychological warfare element. Clark has been dealing with this nonsense since college, players targeting her, throwing shade, trying to break her down. But every time Clark has turned it into fuel. Every slight, every snub, every dirty play has only made her bigger, stronger, and more dangerous. If Carrington thinks she's going to intimidate Clark on the biggest stage, she's got another thing coming. This could backfire spectacularly on Minnesota. Clark lives for these moments. She thrives when people doubt her, when the haters pile on. And now, she has the perfect revenge story teed up for her. The Minnesota Lynx are supposed to be a disciplined machine, a team built on precision, culture, and a winning formula that Cheryl Reeve has been polishing for years. And yet, with one trade, all of that stability was put at risk. By signing Dejanae Carrington, Reeve didn't just add another player, she added a storm. She brought in a headline magnet, someone who doesn't just play basketball but drags the conversation into chaos every time she steps on the floor. And let's be real, Carrington thrives on it. Her game, her personality, her reputation, it's all built on stirring up drama. She has no problem leaning into the villain role, and Reeve just gave her the brightest spotlight possible. The Lynx had all the tools to dominate the playoffs without this move, but now they've chosen the high-risk, high-drama path, and the league is going to be watching every second. Now let's break this down. What exactly does Carrington bring to the Lynx? On paper, sure, she brings hustle, athleticism, and defensive grit. But those attributes come packaged with recklessness, technical fouls, and controversy. She leads the league in flagrant fouls. That's not hustle, that's recklessness. That's a pattern. And in the playoffs, every possession matters. You can't afford silly fouls, you can't afford cheap shots, you can't afford to hand the other team free points. Yet Carrington has built her career on exactly those kinds of plays. You can't separate the hustle from the chaos, because with her, they're the same thing. And that's where Reeve's gamble looks more like desperation than strategy. Did she sign Carrington because she really believes this helps her team win? Or did she sign her because she couldn't let Caitlin Clark have the last laugh? That's the question burning in the background of this entire story. And then there's the narrative. Every league thrives on storylines. But this one is nuclear. Clark versus Carrington. Reeve versus Clark. The All-Star Draft humiliation. The Olympic snub. The dirty plays. The black eye. This isn't just a basketball rivalry. It's a full-blown soap opera playing out on the hardwood. And fans can't look away. Whether you love Clark or you can't stand her, whether you think Carrington is misunderstood or straight up dirty, you're going to watch. And maybe, just maybe, that's part of why the Lynx pulled the trigger. Maybe they're chasing the spectacle as much as the success. But here's the danger. When you build your strategy around pettiness instead of performance, you set yourself up for failure. Let's imagine the finals. Indiana Fever versus Minnesota Lynx. The Fever are young, hungry, and scrappy, led by Caitlin Clark, who's playing like she has something to prove every night. The Lynx are experienced, talented, and structured, led by Nafisa Collier, who's having the best season of her career. It's the matchup everyone wants. But then you add Carrington into the mix, and suddenly it's not just about who plays better basketball. It's about who loses control. Does Carrington go too far and get herself ejected? Do the refs finally decide they've had enough and crack down on her antics? Or does she succeed in rattling Clark, forcing her into mistakes, making her play frustrated instead of focused? That's the wild card. That's the gamble. And it's a gamble Reeve didn't need to take. But maybe the most fascinating part of this story isn't what happens on the court. It's what it says about the people running the league. Think about it. Cheryl Reeve has one of the best coaching resumes in WNBA history. Multiple championships, a dynasty built from scratch, and a reputation for being one of the smartest minds in basketball. And yet even she isn't immune to ego. Even she let a personal grudge shape a basketball decision. That's human, sure, but it's also risky. Because when you let ego drive the car, you're not steering toward victory, you're steering toward disaster. And if the Lynx fall short, if Carrington's presence derails them, history won't remember the 24-5 start or the MVP-level play from Collier. History will remember that Reeve let her pride get in the way of winning. That's the kind of stain that sticks. Meanwhile, Caitlin Clark is sitting back and watching all of this unfold, probably smiling. Because this is the perfect script for her, the ultimate revenge arc. She's already the face of the league, the player drawing record ratings, the one filling arenas. And now she's been handed a villain tailor-made to make her story even bigger. Carrington becomes the foil, Reeve becomes the bitter rival coach, and Clark has the chance to knock them both down on the biggest stage. That's legacy-building stuff. That's how you go from superstar to legend. And if it plays out that way, if Clark ends this season by beating Reeve and exposing Carrington, her story becomes untouchable. But let's not overlook the Dallas Wings in all of this. They may look like the losers for trading Carrington,